Grand Rising, everybody. Grand Rising, family. What city are you tuning in from? If you don't mind, please smash the like, subscribe, hit the all notification bell, give a positive comment if you can, or if you feel as so inclined to press the dislike or whatever. Just trying to get the algorithm to jumping so that I can show up a little bit on more feeds. Got to post to social media, as you know, but Grand Rising. Mm-hmm. What have you learned thus far from Blueprint for Black Power? What have you learned thus far? What other books would you like to be read or to discuss? Are there any topics that you would like for someone to touch on that no one has and that you would like to see a different viewpoint on? Yeah, tell me what city you're tuning in from. Please smash the like. Just give me a second. I'll be right there. Almost complete. All right, let's get started. So today, luckily, I found out that I'll be able to read this whole chapter. It's only one chapter, and this is chapter 5. Even though this is part 13, it depends on where we stop. So I'm going to read all of chapter 5 today, and today's title chapter is Self-Concept and Power. A culture, society, or group are organized, dynamically structured social arrangements where members relate to each other in fairly predictable ways over time and space. Generally, the members of a stable culture, society, or group may be seen as playing particular social roles or a set of roles which are more or less designed to achieve both individual and group goals. According to Horton and Hunt, the orderliness of a society rests upon a network of roles according to which each person accepts certain duties towards others and claims certain rights from others. An orderly society can operate only as long as most people reliably fulfill most of their duties towards others and are able successfully to claim most of their rights from others. We must keep in mind that not only individuals make up the network of roles upon which a society rests, certain groups and social classes also act out and fulfill certain social roles in the network of group roles which characterize the society. The roles individuals and groups play in a society are generally ordered, that is, ranked and classified. Moreover, the social standing or prestige, the material and social benefits, and other social prerogatives the individual or group receives are generally correlated with his or its position in the hierarchy of social ranks. Hence, a society generally includes a social order, a system of people, relationships, and customs operating smoothly to accomplish the work of a society. As Horton and Hunt contend, unless people know what they may expect from one another, not much will get done. No society, even the simplest, can function successfully unless the behavior of most people can be reliably predicted most of the time. However, on a more fundamental level, networks of social roles, of reciprocal rights and duties which define the social order of a society must consistently be held in place and reinforced if the society itself is to remain functionally stable. Social roles must be defined and maintained, and the members of a society conditioned to fulfill and identify with them. Thus, the maintenance of a social order, a social system, or society calls for an underlying system which maintains and regulates its order, a system of social control. Again, Horton and Hunt provide us with a succinct definition. Sociologists use the term social control to describe all the means and processes whereby a group or society secures its members' conformity to its expectations, the means through which people are led to fill their roles as expected. One among a number of important means by which a society, more specifically the dominant group or class in a society, maintains the social order which is beneficial to its interests, is through markedly influencing the ways individuals and groups who make up the social order perceive or define themselves. Such a socially conditioned perception of self-definition is generally referred to as the person's or group's self-concept. The self-concept is one of the major means by which a person or group guides or orders his or its behavior. Thus, to the degree that a person or group's self-concept is influenced or shaped by another, that person or group behavior is socially influenced by the other. For better or worse, we must conclude that to the degree to which an individual group is behaviorally directed according to his or its perception of his or itself, the degree to which his or its self-concept is conditioned and defined by another, the self-concept acts as an instrument of social control, or more precisely, an instrument of social power. Hence, the self-concept of a subordinate individual or group, which has been conditioned and defined by a dominant individual or group, provides the means by which the subordinate individual or group is controlled, or at least noticeably influenced by the dominant other. The self-concept of the subordinate party may be said to reflect in its character and behavior the power of the dominant party and, moreover, to serve in effect as the instrument of the other party's power. In sum, people are largely controlled by being socialized or socially conditioned to perceive themselves in certain ways and thereby to behave in certain ways so as to fill their roles in maintaining a social order. This social order is most efficient and stable when individuals and groups fill their roles in the expected way through habit and preference, as well as identify with their roles to the extent that they perceive them as defining who they naturally are. They and the role become one and the same. If a social order is to function efficiently, its members must acquire the kind of character which makes them want to act in the way they have to act as members of society. They have the desire to do what objectively is necessary for them to do. When a dominant group conditions the self-concept of a subordinate group, it in effect shapes the character of the subordinate group, which makes them want to act in the way they have to act as members of a particular social order or system controlled by the dominant group. The subordinate group is thereby conditioned by the dominant group to desire, to feel, and act in ways which necessarily help to maintain the power of the dominant group in the social order which oppresses and exploits them. Consequently, the subordinate group's self-concept at the same time that it is the instrument of the dominant group's power is also the instrument of its own powerlessness. Self-concept, ethnocentrism, and social power. Since we contend that the self-concept is an instrument of social control and power, it is important that we briefly define its composition and development. We remind the reader of perhaps what he or she has already surmised, that our interest in the self-concept is premised on our contention that the self-concept which characterizes African peoples under the various regimes of white supremacy are the instruments of white power and conversely of black powerlessness. This is because the self-concept of blacks is markedly influenced by the social impositions and conditioning paradigms of whites. Blacks, through having their perceptions of themselves conditioned by whites, empower whites and disempower themselves when they identify with and behave in accordance with their white conditioned self-concepts. This implies, to anticipate our conclusion a bit here, that if blacks are to liberate themselves from the detrimental social control and power of dominant whites, then they must redefine their self-perceptions in ways which will empower themselves. In our rather cursory analysis of the composition of the self-concept, we shall follow the very clear exposition of that concept written by James Coleman. He defines the self-concept and its composition as follows. The individual self-concept is his picture or image of himself, his view of himself as distinct from other persons and things. This self-image incorporates his perception of what he is really like, self-identity, and of his worth as a person, self-evaluation, as well as his aspirations for growth and accomplishment, self-ideal. Self-identity. Coleman goes on to posit that the body image is central to the individual's and group's self-concept. He contends that the individual's early perception of his physical self is called the body image and appears to form the primitive core of his self-concept. Since others perceive and react to the individual, at least partially, in terms of his physical appearance, it is not surprising that the individual's body image may continue to be an important component of his identity and self-concept throughout his life. We need to elaborate on Coleman's statements here in terms of their relevance to African people's self-concept under the propagandistic influence of white supremacy's association of black skin and body with all manner of negative attributes and connotations. The reader is well aware, we are sure, that the internalization of white racist attributes and connotations by blacks has done much to inculcate in Africans a self-concept and self-identity which impair the full development of their positive human potential and severely restrict their range of active possibilities. Coleman goes on to say, when we think of me or my, we may include possessions such as our home, the people we love, the groups we are loyal to, and the values we believe in. Of key importance here is the individual's position and role. The individual is treated in consistent ways by others in accordance with his position in the group, and role behavior considered appropriate to his status is demanded and reinforced by those around him. Thus, his self-identity is confirmed by recurrent and relatively consistent social interactions. By the means just depicted in regard to individuals, the consistent ways whites as a group relate to blacks as a group serve to define the role behavior that whites consider appropriate to their status of blacks in American and global society. Self-evaluation. Inextricably related to self-identity is self-evaluation, whether an individual or group behaviorally perceives his or itself as good or bad, worthy or unworthy, adequate or inadequate, superior or inferior. In a way similar to his acquisition of self-identity, the individual's and group self-evaluation is heavily dependent upon the way in which others view him, on the ways he and it uses the standards of others for measuring his or its adequacy and worth. Another term often synonymous with the term self-evaluation is self-esteem. To a good extent, the individual or group self-esteem determines what he or it thinks he or it are capable of achieving. A person or group self-esteem therefore sets limits on his or its levels of aspiration. Thus, the self-evaluation to which blacks subscribe is conditioned into them by whites, is the psychological means by which whites seek to limit, fix, and shape the behavioral possibilities of blacks. Also, by shaping the self-esteem of blacks, whites seek to shape and limit the behavior of blacks as well as make black behavioral outcomes compatible with the interests of white power and the maintenance of black powerlessness. Self-ideal. Coleman defines the individual's self-ideal as his image of the person he would like to be and thinks he should be. Like self-identity and self-evaluation, the self-ideal is shaped by social conditioning and experience. It is related to the identification individuals or groups make with various models. Consequently, the self-ideal also sets limits on levels of aspiration. However, the ideal self may be markedly different from the real self. The ideal may be markedly less or more than what the person is really capable of achieving. In the first instance, the person may suffer disabling underachievement, inner conflict, and self-devaluation. Under white supremacy, many blacks are often inculcated with impossible self-ideas which subject them to disempowering inner conflicts and motivate them to behave in ways that perpetuate the power of whites to define and control their reality and life in ways compatible with white interests, which may ultimately prove detrimental to their own. We can thus surmise that the self and the way the self is perceived and evaluated, the ideas the self aspires to realize together form a self system a system which shapes and determines behavior, which evinces fairly consistent and characteristic ways of experiencing, knowing, striving, doing, thinking, remembering, and reacting that distinguishes a person or group from other persons or groups. These patterns of perception, information processing, and behaving tend to be consistent with the person's or group's perceptions of himself or itself, with the assumptions he or it makes concerning him or itself and the world he or it perceives him or itself to inhabit. These patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving are subsumed under the concept of self-concept, which typifies the individual or group. The key elements which are integrated into the self-concept of a group or individual may provide it or him with the power of self-determination, the power to act effectively in its own interest or his own best interest, or may be the means by which it or he is controlled and made instrumentally to act in the best interest of others and to the detriment of his or its own best interest. Ethnocentrism, self-concept, and power. One key element in the makeup of the self-concept of an individual's group is his or its ethnicity or race. It is to the role that ethnicity and ethnocentrism play in the making of the self-concept and in their relationships to the engendering or disengendering of social power that we will now examine. We have indicated that self-identity and self-evaluation are key elements in defining the character of the self-concept. We should recognize that these elements are in good part collective and that many of the perceptions of reality, assumptions, values, motives, behavioral tendencies, and goals which underline an individual's self-concept were inculcated in him by his primary and peer groups and by the society of which he is a member. Many of the perceptions he holds about himself, he holds in common with other members of his group and society. Many values the individual ascribes to himself are quite typically ascribed to his group as a whole. For as Coleman contends, as an individual's experience broadens, his self-identity comes to include things outside of himself with which he feels strong personal involvement, emphasis added. One of the principal things in which the individual feels strong personal involvement and which helps to determine his self-concept is his ethnicity. Self-identity, self-evaluation, and self-ideal combined as the self-concept are primarily related to and based on the individual's ethnic identity. Even when and if the individual denies membership in a particular ethnic group, his identity is markedly influenced by the concept of ethnicity. His behavioral and attitudinal orientations are still, to a significant degree, determined by his lack of an ethnic identity. By his ethnic anti-identity, he defines himself by who he is not. In other words, the ordinary self-concept of individuals and groups is to a measurably important degree ethnocentric, in good part determined by the view of the individual or group has of his or its ethnicity. According to Horton and Hunt, ethnocentrism is the tendency for each group to take for granted the superiority of its culture. Ethnocentrism makes our culture into a yardstick with which to measure all other cultures, which are good or bad, high or low, right or queer in proportion as they resemble ours. While it is customary in America, especially among Blacks, to denounce ethnocentrism and to hold it responsible for the most heinous expressions of white racism and racial hatred, it is also important that we take note of the fact that all known societies are ethnocentric. That ethnocentrism is a universal human reaction found in all societies, in all groups, and in particular, all individuals, and that most, if not all, groups within a society are also ethnocentric. When a behavioral tendency may be said to exist spontaneously across all cultures, much the same way that all cultures speak a language, it implies that such a tendency plays a primal, fundamental positive role in human social existence. Ethnocentrism gets us into many of our muddles, yet it is doubtful whether groups can survive without it. Horton and Hunt go on to assert that ethnocentric groups seem to survive better than tolerant groups. Why does this seem to be the case? For a number of reasons we shall explain. Ethnicity provides a primary basis for social identity and group definition, organization, and solidarity. As pointed out earlier, ethnicity is a crucial aspect of the individual's or group's self-identity, providing both with a sense of place and belongingness. The taking of pride in one's ethnic group is basis for holding oneself in high or positive self-esteem. The level of a group's social standing, success, and power is crucially important to its individual members' own positive self-esteem, sense of security, well-being, and purpose is of central importance to its members' wholesome existence and functioning, and is central to the promotion of group unity, loyalty, and morale. An appropriately high level of group pride, or ethnocentrism, combined with the effective group organization, generates group social power. This makes it more likely that the group will provide for the biological, material, social, and psychological needs of itself and each of its members. Ethnocentrism helps to increase a group's probability of surviving and maintaining its autonomy, thereby providing its members some modicum of protection or freedom from the negative impositions and tyrannies of outsiders. Ethnocentrism provides the basis for a group or a national consciousness, reinforces nationalism and patriotism, provides the emotional preparation for identifying with personal and group interests, and justifies and sanctifies individual sacrifices for maintaining group integrity and existence. Ethnocentrism provides for group stability and solidarity by providing and or discouraging the acceptance of alien, perhaps damaging or lethal elements into the group culture, which may lead to its disintegration, subordination, or demise. Ethnocentrism is an enabling factor in human groups and individuals. Its operational presence enables a group and its members to utilize vital and important means, cohesive group action to achieve ends that could not be achieved otherwise. Hence, ethnocentrism is a central force of power in almost any group. Consequently, almost every race, social class, regional or sectional group, occupational group, recreational group, or group of any kind encourages the ethnocentrism of its members. Ethnocentrism is akin to the concept of esprit de corps, the spiritual heart and soul of a group. Thus, when a group's ethnic pride is negated, the ethnocentric self-esteem is lowered, its members are demoralized, its unity threatened by disintegration, its mental and physical agility and stamina fatigued, its power dissipated. This is the major reason why, since the slavery period until the present moment, dominant whites have unrelentingly negated African ethnicity, culture, and character in every possible way at every possible level of intensity. An attack on a group's ethnicity is an attack on its center of power. To control the definition and depiction of a group's ethnicity is to control a group's self-definition, its self-perception, and is thereby tantamount to the reactionary control of its behavior. When the members of a group internalize the negative definition of their ethnicity and a host of negative associations regarding their ethnic identity and character, the organizational ability of the group is severely weakened and made dysfunctional, a condition of relative powerlessness. Since the self-concept helps to motivate and organize behavior, determines interest and taste, levels of aspirations, determines what abilities will be sharply developed and others left to atrophy, helps to determine the type and quality of the individual's personal attitudes toward and relations with others in his group, with his group as a whole. The shaping of the self-concept is tantamount to shaping all these things. To shape the self-concept is to gain power over personality, or at least to place limits on its range and capability. Ethnicity is one central element which helps to shape the individual's or group's self-concept. Therefore, the characterization of an individual or group's ethnicity conveys the power to characterize his or its self-concept. Consequently, the self-concept of individual or group becomes an instrument of power of those who have effectively characterized that individual or group's basic sense of ethnicity to begin with. This mechanism is one of the most influential means by which dominant whites have gained possession of the African self-concept and thereby exercised power over blacks. However, the white power that has found its way into the central headquarters of the collective African self-concept is not often felt by blacks to be an alien intrusion into their collective personality, because as a part of the self-concept, it is perceived to be a natural or innate aspect of the personality. Hence, to paraphrase from FROMM, Africans who have internalized an ethnic self-concept depreciated by racist whites are thereby made to want to act the way they have to act, to desire to do what is objectively necessary for them to do in order to unwittingly collude with racist whites and perpetuating a system that dominates, exploits, and deprives them of power. Thus, if Africans are to liberate themselves from European domination, empower themselves, and enrich their quality of life, they must repudiate the power of Europeans to characterize their ethnicity, and through it, gain power over them by characterizing their own perception of themselves. Africans must become the primary definers of their own ethnicity and determiners of their self-perception, character, and behavior. This means that Africans must develop a robust, wholesome ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism of the European and Asian nations, which exercise global economic and military power, is notoriously high. No nation of people can arise to power without pride of a nation and race. Ethnocentrism need not lead to racism. Pride of ethnicity empowers a group best to Ethnocentrism need not lead to racism. Pride of ethnicity empowers a group to best actualize its human potentials and possibilities, to protect its vital interests, enhance its quality of life, and maintain its autonomy. This does not require that it abusively dominate and exploit other groups and attempt to justify those activities in terms of racial superiority. Racism has given ethnocentrism a bad name, but Africans must not reject positive ethnocentrism for that reason. For to reject positive African ethnocentrism is to reject Black power. I hope your today is great and may your tomorrow be greater. Race first at all times, and at all times, race first. Hotep family. Oh yeah, play this back because there was volumes of beautiful information for those of us not recognizing to take pride in being African.